All right, everyone, welcome to Tim's Vital Confessions. And man, oh man, I'm excited to have this episode because two longtime co hosts, never been on a show together. This is a historic meeting or
Hey, Mike.
hysterical meeting, one or the other.
I feel like I've
Yeah,
already known him.
yeah, it's weird to think about it. It's just the stars have never aligned before now.
But here we
So
are.
we've got Matt Phillips,
Hey,
Mike
guys.
Ladano, and me. I am your host, Tim Derling, and thank you for watching. And yeah, we're doing an episode. This was a topic that Matt had suggested a long time ago. We're finally getting it together. And I'm calling this one, this should really be on CD. So these are releases that have either never been issued in CD form, which in and of itself is strange because over time, most things get issued. Most things, but there's these few that just haven't done. They're long out of print, so all that's available is used copies, super expensive. It was only released as a limited edition thing one time, and if you didn't get it, as Mike likes to say, you pay the late tax. And not only are you paying the late tax, but you're paying the late tax on something on a used CD. So you always take that chance. It's never been out by itself. If it's been on CD, it's been reissued as part of an album that's related to the time of whoever it is. There's probably a few examples of those. And I know that all of us have a lot of EPs because EPs, for some reason, tend to get forgotten when a band's catalog would get issued on CD. Like, and I'm talking about back in the 80s when the CDs were first issued. For some reason, they skip over the CDs. Like a really good example, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the EP didn't sell, but a really good example that I don't have, and I don't know how hard it is to find these days. A really successful EP had two hit singles off of it. David Lee Roth, "Crazy from the Heat." That was not issued on CD, at least in North America, until 1992. So 7 years after it came out. And it's one of those things where, because Dave's album sales at that time were really declining, if it had been any longer, Warner Brothers just probably would never have issued it. And it would have been a smaller thing like Friday Music or somebody like that, or Rhino having to reissue it. So anyway, I don't know what all the guys have. I do know that if we have anything in common, we're all going to talk about that one thing. And I know Mike's got one, I don't care what anybody says, one of the rarest CDs out there that maybe was issued twice. Once when it came out, once 8 years later, and that's it. Dying for a reissue. So we're going to start off in the order that I see. We're going to split up our piles, talk about three or four things, and then move on to the next. So we're going to start off with Matt. What have you got for us for something that you would like to see reissued or issued on CD?
So, guys, I'm going to break the rules just a tiny bit, a few times in this video. But here's one of my favorite Canadian bands that formed in 1989. You've heard me talk about them before on some of my best album covers and favorite finds, but this is a band called Boot Sauce. They were formed in Montreal back in 1989. On the surface, you could maybe call them Canada's version of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But long story short, when their stuff came out on CD, this is their debut, the Brown album. Then they came out with Bowl. We've got a few best kind of collections. This stuff has never been issued again, and it's never been issued on vinyl. I'd love to see their entire discography come back out, and some bonus tracks and proper packaging. So that's my first on my list. The next one I'm going to talk about only came out once in the UK. Get another favorite band of mine, The Cult. And they released something called Rare Cult way back in 2000. It came out as a box set. So like a 6 CD or a 7 CD, depending on which version you found. So Rare Cult, I've never even seen this in the wild before. They did do this. The reason I'm sure like a single CD kind of Rare Cult, but that box set goes for thousands of dollars online new, and I've never even seen it in person. But I'd love to have a proper reissue of that on CD, or I mean the whole vinyl package too. But I would definitely buy the full CD package of Rare Cult.
I'll be right back and show you my copies, plural.
Oh,
I was going to say Mike's probably got one of those versions. So what's on that, Matt? What is like completely unreleased stuff, or is it live stuff, or remixes, or
radio sessions and remixes and demos? And then you've got the Cult originally, when they recorded their Electric album, it had that same kind of really wet, washy, super effecty sound that the previous album Love had. So the album was all finished, and then the band just wasn't happy with it. They reconvened back into the studio with Rick Rubin, who basically, I mean, this is kind of simplifying it quite a bit, but basically they looked at all the songs and he's like, let's make this more kind of AC/DC-ish. Let's get right down to the guts of these songs. And he stripped all the kind of wishy-washy stuff. Wow, Mike.
That's the Rare Cult 7 CD, but Matt, what you might not even be aware exists is the additional Rare Cult demo sessions 5 CD box set. I've got them both.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Jealous. and even with these, you still need Best of Rare Cult to get all the tracks. Best of Rare Cult had like 3 songs that aren't on these.
Oh, no.
Wow.
And then just one more thing from my list I want to show. I wanted to wait until Mike showed back up. I wasn't sure if he had a copy of this, but something that we found for Record Store Day. Originally, this was released in January of 1979, and then in April, we got a reissue. This is the Def Leppard EP. They finally, reissued on vinyl. But wouldn't it be nice to have some digital copies of these songs, right? The original version, Ride Into the Sun, and then we got Get Your Rocks Off, and
the only with Frank Noon on drums,
right?
And this is a nice reprinting of the original EP. I think Joe Elliott's parents lent him the money to have this printed, and this was, I remember this because we all eventually found it, you, me, and Will, and that episode's on here somewhere. And there was a guy right behind me, and I heard him say, "It's the only reason I came." And what are you going to do? Like, it happens a lot. But it would be nice to have a CD version of that, and that's definitely one I was going to talk about.
Now there is a CD version within a box set, but
within a box set,
as you said, you can't buy it as an individual disc.
A box set. I might add that Mr. Lodano's name is in the credits.
Oh, really?
Maybe, yeah.
There's a live applause, Mike. That's pretty darn cool.
Thank you.
And just while we're talking about Def Leppard, so of course they released the In the Round bass and the Historia. These originally came out on VHS.
Yes.
Yep.
But I'd love to have that In the Round In Your Face concert just on its own, not as something I need. I don't need another 7th copy of Hysteria.
I've always thought that they were so big at that time, they could have put that out by itself in 1989. It would have sold millions because people were hungry for new Def Leppard at that point.
And possibly reduce the pressure on the follow-up album, just reduce the pressure a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And not only put it out, guys, but because they performed it at the MTV Awards that year, put Tear It Down on there and release it as a single and see what happens. Anyway, didn't happen. But good choice, Matt. Would love to have a standalone of that. I mean, I got the last reissue of Hysteria. I just got the bare bones version, which just has the album, and then the other 2 CDs are around In Your Face. It's almost by itself, but not quite. Doesn't have the cover art. Yeah, good choice.
Excellent. Am I up?
All right, over to Mike. You're up.
Okay, so I'm going to break brand new ground here on Tim's Vinyl Confessions, I think, with a band that I don't know if you've ever shown on this show before. But this dates back to, I think, 1990. And it has only received 1 official cassette release as a part of their box set. Now, can you identify that artist based on that artwork? Maybe not. What if I take the cassette out, plain white cassette, and then it says for Stone and Jeff?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
this is the Pearl Jam Mama Son demo, which I just checked before we went live. This has never been issued anywhere else except for this cassette, which is a part of the 10 deluxe box set, which I have. The only Pearl Jam box set that I have, but you know, I'm a sucker for stuff like cassette reissues. They just get me, you know?
Yeah.
And another cassette from an artist that Tim knows personally is this little guy here. Trapper, Songs from the Electric North, never
Oh, yeah.
released on CD. 6 tracks, Sean Kelly and M. Griner. They do a cover of Bye Bye Mon Cowboy. And I paid like, I can't remember what I paid, like $35 US for this on Discogs. And I messaged Sean and told him that that's what I paid. And he's like, oh man, I can't believe you did that. You know, it's like, well, I wanted it and I had to pay the late tax because this was, I think, only for sale on that tour that they opened for Def Leppard. Pretty much, you know.
Hold that cassette up again, Mike. I want to see how the Electric. Yeah, okay, the Electric North. The way that that's written, and I'm pretty sure this is by design, because Sean knows his stuff. There was a K-Tel compilation that came out in 1983 called Electric North, which, as you may have guessed, has it's Bryan Adams and Coney Hatch and Street Heart and stuff like that. Pretty sure the way Electric North is written on there looks much the same.
I'm sure you're right because, as you said, Sean Kelly knows his stuff. It's got that
he
kind of
knows
neon piping look. It's very cool, and it's a great EP, by the way. I believe, well, I kept it sealed, obviously, as you can see. But I believe the way I acquired these songs was downloading them off iTunes, strictly just so I could, keep the cassette sealed. I paid $35 for it, right?
Yeah.
And here's something I do have on CD, but to my knowledge has only been released in Japan on this one edition.
Oh.
And that's kind of shocking when you think about it. Kiss, something that's hardly available by Kiss. Like, they haven't exploited this. They haven't reissued it. Now, the nice thing about this compared to the vinyl that I'm sure Tim has, and maybe Matt too, is that this has 2 bonus tracks. Japan also got Shandy and Escape from the Island in their version. Yeah. I got this at a Sunrise Records in 1995. I couldn't believe my luck. I was just flipping through the Kiss. There it was. And on the same trip, I got Judas Priest Unleashed in the East, which had a 4-song bonus EP kind of tacked on as bonus tracks. Yeah, so Gene, hi, you guys are retired now, okay? So time to start thinking about releasing catalog stuff. There's 4 songs on here that were not on Kiss albums. Yeah. I mean, they've been on compilations and things since, but and honestly, guys, this is a good listen. This is actually, when I want a single disc compilation of Kiss to listen to, this is the one I go for.
Yeah, I really like Killers. I like the 4 new songs and I like the track listing. Yeah, it's funny. Honestly, I never thought of that one, but yeah, I forget that was never. It was issued on vinyl when they did the 2014 vinyl reissues.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was issued by itself or it was part of the Kisteria box. And there's so many, I get them mixed up.
There were like 6 albums that were only in that box.
Yeah, Greatest Kiss, that was one of them. But I don't think it's been reissued on CD. I don't think it's ever been issued still on CD in North America. And maybe the reason I didn't think about that is because I was fortunate enough back in 94, and I was still just getting into Kiss and didn't have all the albums at that point. I found that at a Sam's, and I can only guess that somebody asked them to order it in and never picked it up. That's why it was in the rack. Couldn't believe it. So yeah, I didn't even have all the Kiss albums, and I'm hearing those 4 songs from Killers. That was quite a find at the time. I mean, this is pre-internet, so yeah. Good.
One other thing about this, I just thought I should show you because you like the side spines. You can see that this was part of a series that would have lined up and made a full Kiss logo as well.
Okay, mine's not like that. Mine's an early Japanese issue.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
That's all I have for this turn.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna keep going with. Let me see. All right. I'm gonna show some things that were issued on CD, but are out of print, and in some cases, hopelessly out of print. Mike has talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
Max Webster Diamonds. Now I'm doing this as a public service for people that don't have it because it really should be reissued. So, this is a best of that Anthem originally put out in 1981. It was only issued in Canada. It was never issued in the States on Mercury. because they weren't successful. And the entire Max Webster catalog, as far as studio albums, got reissued probably sometime in the late 80s by Anthem, and they've all got those annoying featuring Kim Mitchell and, you know, written on the covers. Now, what didn't get reissued, and this would drive me nuts, is the live album, Live Magnetic Air, and also Diamonds, the best of. Yeah. So in 1995, which is the copyright date on this, it says Anthem Entertainment copyright, but it says Magada Heritage.
Okay.
So they issued both Live Magnetic Air and Diamonds. Now, Live Magnetic Air eventually got issued as part of the Party box set, which I've got on CD. They're the little thin little sleeves, but it's on CD. And they didn't issue this, which they really should have, because it's not a big catalog. So what would have been the harm of sticking this on here? But the biggest thing is that there were 2 songs on this album that were recorded for the debut that never ended up on an album. And those are Hot Spots and Overnight Sensation. Not the greatest songs in the world, but you're dealing with a band that had such a small catalog. Why not put it all out? Or at least put those 2 songs on the bonus EP that came with the box set. So this could really stand for a reissue. This is also one of those dumb ones where the label is upside down on the side, but I happen to find this at a pretty decent price, I think, on eBay, and it doesn't skip. So that's one that needs, for Canadian fans anyway, that needs a reissue. Probably won't, because there's this, you know, I realize in saying this, and I think we all do, if it hasn't happened by now, it's probably not going to, unless it's a big, big band. Now, here's a band that people still talk about to this day, and a lot of people ask, why hasn't this been reissued on CD? One of the rare CDs in my collection, the debut Rat EP from 1983, possibly my favorite Rat release, even though it's an EP. I love every second of this. It's so good. This came out before Out of the Cellar, and this is the one time it was issued on CD in the States on Atlantic or Time Coast Communications, and therein, I think, lies part of the reason why it's never been reissued, because obviously if Atlantic owned it, we would have had a reissue. Rock Candy would have put it out. It would have been part of that box set. That's another thing. When bands put out these box sets and they're missed something, I hate that too. It makes me not want to buy them.
Right.
All I can figure, there's got to be a rights issue with this. And, you know, if Stephen Pearcy had the rights to it himself, he'd have put it out. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's a big one right there. And I forgot about this, and then I got thinking about it, and then I thought, yeah, I'm going to show this, even though it's only 12 years old. Van Halen, different kind of truth.
Okay.
This does not show up on digital. Not that I'm a big digital guy, but I will say this: when I post to Instagram, I do like to find music to accompany it. And all I can find are the 2 songs, She's the Woman and Chinatown, that are on that Tokyo Live CD. You can't find the studio tracks here. Now, what I'd like to see happen is for the rights to this album to shift over to Warner Brothers or Warner Records, whatever the hell they're called now, like it always should have been. This broke the cycle. It's the only thing that didn't come out on Warner. Even that Tokyo album came out on Warner. So yeah, I mean, I love this album, and this version has the bonus DVD with it. And you know, I wouldn't want to try and find it now. So a Van Halen album that's rare, that shouldn't be. So that's the last of the CD things that I have to talk about. So we'll flip it over to Matt now.
Right on. I got 2 EPs to talk about and another kind of full discography. Let's talk about the full discography first. So 1984, a little band called Great White made their debut with a self-titled album. They've since had a few different singers, a few different versions of Great White. We've got the actual Great White. We've got Jack Russell's Great White. But they have never had their discographies released like re-released, reissued. Here's Once Bitten. Of course, I have Twice Shy on vinyl, but you can find these fairly easily. Not the later albums though. When you're getting into like this one, even the Great White cover album they did, how cool would that look like on vinyl or love to see all of these, their entire discography reissued. Even
Yeah.
here, we've got the censored version of Hooked.
Yeah, talk about a band with a fractured, history, but they they've been on so many different labels, and it's just kind of a mess. But yeah, and yeah, you can find used copies of the big albums, Once Bitten and Twice Shy. But you guys can probably attest those old Capitol CDs sound terrible. Like they're very quiet.
Yeah.
And I know that same idea, like the old Poison CDs. If you were to make a mix CD, burn tracks from say the original Open Up and Say Ah CD to the greatest hits, the volume differences are striking. But yeah, I'm really surprised Rock Candy hasn't stepped in, and I can't even imagine how the rights are probably all over the place. I mean, they did the one for Sony in the late 90s, and then they've just bounced around indie labels, and it's too bad because yeah, it's hard. I don't have all the Great White stuff. I don't even have the first two on CD because they're rare. So yeah, good choice overall, like as a band as a whole. Yeah, Great White could really stand a reissue.
And then I just have two more EPs to talk about. So in 1983, kind of a little bit of a stopgap between studio albums. Probably my favorite band, In Excess. Now they just put Shabu Shaba in 1982, and then we got this curious collection. I always thought this was kind of a strange illustrated cover, but yeah, Tim's got the. I had that. I actually
This was yours. You gave this
Yeah.
to me. Yeah.
Found that really early in my getting into In Excess. It was released on cassette, and of course the promo. But as far as I know, any kind of research I've done, this was never released digitally or on CD. It's got extended versions of Black and White, To Look at You. They're one of their singles, The One Thing, and a song called Here Comes with a two on the end of it. Never, they've never talked about reissuing this on CD, and I'd love to see it. So they're obviously leaning really heavily on reissuing all their back catalog now. In Excess are no longer playing live. So I think there's a chance that may come out someday.
I think so.
I would hope so.
And the last EP I wanted to talk about, I found this one on. So they did reissue this on Record Store Day. It's Joe Satriani's first EP. Oh, Mike's reaching for something. This came out in 1984, so there's our Record Store Day reissue. But as far as I know, this has never come out on cassette or CD. So
The only CD release was not the complete thing. It was 4 of the 5 songs on the Joe Satriani Time Machine compilation, and that's it. That was missing Talk to Me. Or Saying Goodbye, one of the two.
I'm afraid I'm with the have-nots on that. I'm still building my Satch collection. And just to add to the In Excess thing, when we're talking about EPs, guys, we're not talking about singles so much. The fact is, and this is something that people only like me would notice, is that this actually came up with an official album serial number. Like this is the Atco numbering series. So this was not issued as a single because it would have had a different number. Now there is, I've looked on Discogs, there is a CD called Decadence, but it's completely different. It's got completely different songs on it. So it's not the same thing. And even that is really expensive. The other thing that I think it would be nice if they reissued it just because it's kind of neat. I kind of like the cover, is that early compilation they put out called In Excessive. That only came out in Australia in like 82. It came out when they signed with Atlantic internationally. So yeah, good choices.
All right, over to you.
All right, Mike.
One that I don't have to show Steve Earle, the Pink and Black EP, his very first release. Those 4 songs were later reissued on a Steve Earle compilation called The Early Years. But my buddy Trevor, he's a huge Steve Earle collector, huge fan, and he'd always wanted to just see a copy of the Pink and Black EP without the early years attached to it, you know? So there's one that I've actually, to my knowledge, never seen physically. There's another one that I forgot to grab, so we'll just use our imaginations. But if you can picture Jerry McGee from Brighton Rock, that cool
Yes.
pencil sketch of Jerry McGee from Brighton Rock. They did a 4-song EP, a self-titled EP before their first album with earlier versions of those songs and one song that never made it onto the album, The Fool's Waltz. But I really liked that EP. It had a different lineup too. It had Johnny Victor on keyboards. For stuff that I do have to show, here's a live EP by Dio. We talked earlier about what was allowed on these lists, and this was later reissued as part of the Sacred Heart 2 CD Deluxe, but not so easy to find as an individual CD release, that's for sure. And, you know, this is a really good listen. I've always enjoyed listening to Intermission, and it's got Time to Burn on it, that studio track, which is so good. If I recall correctly, there was some dispute over who was playing guitar on some of these tracks, and whether it was Craig Goldie versus Vivian Campbell. I can't remember the details of that, but I'm sure somebody in the comments will remark. But that's even a cool picture of Dio, isn't it?
Harrison, where are you, man?
Harrison. And of course,
Dio
there's
guy.
the dragon. I'm sure the dragon had
Yeah.
a nickname too. All of Dio's
Wasn't he
mascots.
called? Oh, I knew this. Wasn't he called Nabish or something like that? Or
Probably, but Dio
I was
is
going to say
stabbing him.
Murray, but I think Murray was the
Murray's
Black
the-
Sabbath demon. Yeah.
No, Murray is the holy diver demon.
Oh, okay.
But if you have a look there, you know, Dio stabbing him in the mouth with a sword, which I don't think personally is an effective way to kill the dragon, but Dio has more experience with killing dragons than I do, so we're going to default to Dio. And here's another one that Tim and I were talking about earlier today. Very frustratingly hard to find on CD. And, you know, when we were kids, when cassette was king, this was easy to find. Everybody had a cassette of Made in Japan. That was the way I grew up, was a cassette of Made in Japan. But, you know, as technology changes and I'm able to afford better equipment and so on and so forth, I wanted something that was what I call a hard product, vinyl or CD. A cassette I consider a little bit on the fragile side, you know, for a permanent archival collectible.
They won't play forever.
Right, exactly. So I wanted something that would be a little bit more long lasting in my collection. And also, that's a great piece of art by Derek Riggs. There's a Super 7 action figure of Eddie that comes with the silver samurai sword that I wish I had. But yeah, Made in Japan. This was, I think the first Paul Di'Anno I ever heard was Made in Japan. And of course, they always have these funny liner notes. This record is dedicated to all the headbangers, earth dogs, and metal merchants around the world. Thanks for making our first world tour such a success. There you go.
You know,
and
it's
also
funny.
one.
Just real quick. You know, you've seen my episode. I've never shown Iron Maiden stuff, but I've my whole life I've been surrounded by Maiden fans, so I'm fairly familiar with the catalog. And I remember my buddy John, who's been on here before, the first Maiden he bought was Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. So we played a lot of Atari in the summer of '89, listening to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. But then we went to Fredericton, like either with his parents or my parents, because neither of us, you know, were driving at that point. We're 14 or 15. And I think it was at a Kmart in like the cheaper cassettes, not the delete bin, but the, you know, the budget. He bought Made in Japan there because he had enough money for it. It was like $5.99 or something. And we listened to that EP a lot. Now that came out in 1996 when Castle reissued the Maiden catalog. It was part of the Killers reissue,
yes,
but not by itself.
Right. And that's one of my personal holy grail items. Saw it at HMV Toronto in the summer of '96. And I believe it even had like a red Obi strip going over it, which, you know, memory is a tricky thing, but I believe it did. I'm just going to show off one more EP, live EP on this turn. And this is another one that Tim and I have discussed by one of Tim's absolute favorite singers. And look at that's even signed. Greg Hines.
Yeah, that's
He
I
didn't sign
don't
it
have,
Fritz. He signed it Greg.
I don't even have that. I'd love to have that. Yeah.
Greg Hines, Fritz Sticks, Rock You. 6 songs. You can barely read them, but they're at the top. They're Young and Reckless, Rock You, Make You Do Anything You Want, Gimme Gimme Good Lovin', Animal House, and Heavy Metal Love. Only 3 of these songs are available on CD on the Rock Candy Walking the Razor's Edge reissue. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that because it's a lot of hearsay and he said, she said. Tim knows what I'm talking about.
I do.
But it's shocking to me that Rock Candy would reissue 3 of the 6 live songs,
Yeah.
but the other 3 have not come out on other Rock Candy reissues.
Or
That's
by
shocking.
itself. That's a cool cover. I like it. I mean,
It
would be
is.
real, you know, I don't want to exhaust this, but instead of worrying, I'd like to see it reissued. I'm just going to shut up.
I know what you were going to say.
This is a frustrating band because
you know what? I'll go ahead and say what's on Tim's mind. Instead of focusing on NFTs and indie tunes, maybe Helix should spend some time looking into getting some quality reissues out. That's what we were doing.
I buy it. I would buy it, you know. And I'm really surprised because Brian's reissued a lot of things. I mean, he's done a lot of reissues, but it probably comes down to the fact that those recordings are probably owned by EMI, which now I think means they're owned by Universal ultimately. So I don't know.
They seem to have absolutely no interest in reissuing this stuff themselves, ahead of other bands that, you know, were they as big as Helix? Were they not as big as Helix? But they've got reissues out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me for this turn.
Cool. Good stuff. I want to mention one thing before I forget, because I had it written down, so I don't own this. It's a yes, I'm going to call it an album called From a Page. Now, this came out in, I want to say 2012, 2013. I'd have to look it up, but in the early 2010s, I guess we'll call it, after the Fly From Here album, which was the only album they did with Montreal singer Benoit David. Yeah. And I really liked that album. Now, this collection of songs called From a Page, like I think it's only 5 or 6 songs, but so they're long songs. It's an album's worth of material. It's the only official recordings that Oliver Wakeman played on, son of Rick Wakeman. Oh. And it's the only other thing that Benoit sings on as far as original material goes. For some reason, and this came out before I got into Yes, so I missed the boat on it. And it's really expensive to buy on used vinyl. And the only copy of it I can see on CD is that there's one of many live albums by them, but there's a live show with, I think, that lineup, maybe not that lineup, don't know, but it's like a second CD or a third CD that this From a Page. I'd like to see that get a proper reissue. And I do have 2 other vinyl things to talk about. And they're both in their, why can't I think of the word for it? In their construction, in their, what is the word? The way that what they consist of, in their configuration, there's a better word for this. They're both basically the same thing. And as soon as I say what it is, you're both going to know both things I'm going to tell you. They are both reissues of a band's first 3 records in one set. Okay, so I'm going to go with probably the less obvious one first. Rush Archives.
Yeah.
This came out in early '78, so this came out in between Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, and this is Rush, Fly By Night, and Caress of Steel. And this is a U.S. Mercury copy, which Matt found for me, I think in Boston, if memory serves, with these dashing photos of our heroes here. This probably because Farewell to Kings had Closer to the Heart, and they were starting to get more airplay, and this was the record label probably thought, well, let's see if we can get some more mileage out of these first 3 albums. And this is a case where I don't understand why in the early to mid 80s when, well, I'm going to say Mercury because all Anthem did was get the Mercury, not rights, but the raw materials to make the CDs and stick the Anthem logo on them. But when Mercury reissued the Rush catalog, they could have very easily stuck these 3 albums onto 2 CDs and people would have bought them. Like this set was only ever issued on, well, it came out on 8-track and then on cassette and vinyl. And it eventually went platinum. It was certified platinum in 1995.
Wow.
So all I could figure is that people kept buying the cassettes. That's the only thing I can figure, because that's all that would have been readily available. There's a very rare variant of this where it's a black cover. Same art, but a black cover instead of gray. I don't have it. I've seen it. It was like $60 at one of the expos in Riverview. This one's a mystery to me. And this year, being the 50th anniversary of the first Rush album, maybe it's time. I'll ask you, Simon. No. And the other one is, once I said that, say, well, the other one, I know the other ones he's going to talk about.
Yep.
Little band called Kiss. The Originals, same thing. First 3 albums in one convenient location.
Yeah.
This came out in 76, in between Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over, at least according to the Casablanca serial numbers. And Matt and I we've had multiple versions of this over the years, trying to find a more complete version, because it came with a booklet. I've got the booklet. 6 wallet-sized full-color Kiss Rock Superstar cards. I don't have any of those. What I do have are some old trading cards that I got. I think I got one from Marco. I got an old Kiss postcard. I don't know where that came from. A giant Kiss Army sticker. That's gone. But again, same label, Mercury. When they put out the Kiss albums on CD, they could have stuck this out and made some money. There you go. And made some money off of it, because Kiss fans will buy it.
Yeah.
But again, if it hasn't happened by now. But now I will say this, and it's kind of funny, like Discogs does this thing where if something has the same material on it, they'll count it. In, I want to say 2005, Mercury started reissuing these Chronicles series. Came in a tall, like same size as a long box, and there's one that has the first 3 Kiss albums on it. Discogs counts that as a CD version of the originals, but I know it's just the first album art and, ghosted back in there. I still like this cover. So I'd still like to see this on CD. I made one up. I printed one off. It's not the same. I want a legit copy. And this would cost them almost nothing to do. Here's the thing, guys. It costs money to have vinyl pressed. Mm-hmm. It costs money to have cassettes made. It costs very, very little to put CDs out, I would think. Very, very low, and it's low risk with Kiss fans, because we'll buy it. That's my go around for this. So back over to Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say briefly, 1976 was obviously going to be quite a year for Kiss. So they released Destroyer in March of 76. And then they actually released this collection in like the summer of 76. So Beth still hadn't come out and become the big hit. So Destroyer still itself wasn't a huge hit. So they released Destroyer. Then in the summertime, they put out the Originals. And then eventually in August, Beth came out and became the massive hit for them. And then in that fall, in November, is when we got another album from Kiss, Rock and Roll Over. Some of the fans. Yeah, I would love to have. Kiss are retired now. They're not touring. Very easy to focus on some of this archival stuff and put it out. So
yeah, put it out with with a bonus. Dig up another concert. Give us something from the time, or I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's important for people to note, and Kiss fans know this, but remember, Destroyer wasn't a hit right out of the gates. It struggled. So this was probably Casablanca saying, we got to get some money back in the pipeline here. And so
they were very smart about keeping Kiss releases on the shelves back then.
Oh,
very smart.
Yeah. And between 1974 and 1978, there was never just one thing that came out.
And, regarding the Originals, even if you did have 2 or all 3 of those early albums, they gave you something extra to make it worth your while.
There was added value. Yeah. And yeah, I'm really surprised. Like, this didn't even come out on cassette.
No.
It came out on vinyl and 8-track. As far as I know, it never even came out on cassette, which doesn't even make sense. So
now Originals 2, that's even more rare.
Wow, that only came out in Japan, didn't it? Yeah. But
this
was an official Casablanca worldwide release, and like I like showing these off because this is quite obviously the Canadian version, because it's like 3 discs.
Right.
3-record set.
But even that font that Casablanca used on all the Kiss records, you know, I tried to always duplicate that font when I made Kiss cassettes.
Yeah.
Like there's something so nostalgic about that cover, the typeface, everything about it.
Yeah.
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 There you go.
Yeah.
I would
And
want
like
to
the way
see
the
that
song titles are
exactly.
written here too.
Yeah, that again, it's
That's
that
from
font.
is that from the first, like that, what did they use? They've used that font on something.
I believe the first album, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Either
Okay.
way, it's a very recognizable font, and I would love to see a reissue of that exactly as is in a shrunken down thing with the collector's cards, maybe a little bit smaller, all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Maybe some reprints of the tour books or something.
Right,
Yeah.
like
So
a sticker that sized, you know, it
yeah,
would be so easy. It would be
and
so
and
easy.
and I remember Matt sending me like this thing had all these different fonts on it, and there was the Kiss font called Die Nasty. And
That's right.
when
That's
you
what I
print
used.
anything, it's hard to read. So it's really only good for the Kiss logo. It's really hard if that's all you use for your font. It's like, what does this even say?
And
Anyway.
Tim, you mentioned with Archives that it's the 50th anniversary. It's also the 50th anniversary for Kiss. So, guys,
I can see.
Gene, we know you're touring.
Yeah, I can see the originals getting reissued before Archives.
God, let's hope.
Yeah,
let's hope.
But I'd like to see them both. But
I think if somebody
right,
like
Matt.
that Robert V. Conti guy was still involved with Kiss, I think we'd see more of this stuff.
And you know what? Knowing I've seen interviews with him, he was really enthusiastic about getting them done right. And
yes, he was.
Like the vinyl reissues in the '80s, they wouldn't be gatefold. They'd stick the 2 records to Alive in one sleeve. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he pushed for that. Hey, let's do the originals. No, it's the first 3 albums. Yeah, anyway.
I agree fully.
All right, Matt.
Right on. I've got a few, I'd say 2 or 3 more groupings of and I'm done through my list. For this grouping, I'm going to talk about a few heavy hitters. First one's going to be from 1982. This is Metallica's No Life Till Leather cassette. Of course, this is not.
I can't believe you have that.
Yeah, I found this on Record Store Day. I think this is the first time I bought a cassette again in like 30 years. Paid $19.95 for this cassette that I've never opened. Of course, it's got Hit the Lights, The Mechanics, Motor Breath, original version of Seek and Destroy. Would love to see a digital version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And my next heavy hitter I want to talk about is kind of the solo project from Jason Newsted. First about this little EP, Newsted's Metal, and it came with this nice little. I had to go find I've got a huge collection of guitar picks, but there's the Jason Newsted Metal guitar pick, and then he released a full-length album, Heavy Metal Music.
Yes.
Now, this has never been on vinyl before. It was so in Europe, of course. 2013, they got like a special version of this. You know, they've never stopped printing up records in Europe, but I'd love to have this on vinyl. And then a remake of this album and the first album, and maybe some, did some live stuff. Did they actually ever tour any of these songs, Tim?
Yeah, they did for about a year, and then Jason pulled the plug on it. I really enjoyed these. I mean, this kind of scratched the itch for old school Metallica sound, and he's not a bad vocalist for this kind of music.
I've always liked his vocals, especially backing up James.
And of course, there were 2 songs on the EP that didn't make. 2 of the 4 songs on the EP made the full album, 2 didn't. And both really good. The Metallica, the only thing I want to add to the No Life Till Leather, and I'm not saying this just because my understanding is that there were some issues with Dave Mustaine, which is why this didn't get put out on anything else but the cassette. But I love how they made this look like a TDK.
Yes.
Where it says BLK for Blackened, that would be TDK. Very recognizable to any of us, even the way it's written on here. And of course, the Mechanics is the original version of 4 Horsemen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, which Megadeth ended up recording as the Mechanics on their first album. But yeah, I think I paid $50 for this because I missed out on it first time. Late tax. Love to get it on CD.
I'd settle for cassette myself.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike, okay.
How many more rounds are we going to make?
I've only got 2 more things to talk about.
Okay, so I've got a few more things. I'll just there's the Rat EP. Apparently I didn't show that earlier.
Yeah.
Here's one that will never get reissued, guys. I'm sure you've heard of it though. Have you?
Oh, I've heard of it.
Do you know who this is?
Is that the one with like the Thin Lizzy guys?
It's Thin Lizzy. It is Thin Lizzy along with two other guys. The singer was a guy by the name of Benny White. And I reviewed this album on my website with, I don't know if you know Scott, the heavy metal overlord. We did a joint review on it, and Scott made a comment about how he could picture Benny White on stage in these gold lame trousers. Benny White came to the website and left a comment. And you know, we left a decent review of this. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. You know,
When did that come out?
there's so little information on this. Like the names of the band members aren't listed on here.
Because I mean, like Deep Purple were a
1973.
functioning. Yeah, so Deep Purple were like the biggest heavy rock band in the world at this point.
Right, Machine Head had come out. They were
Yeah,
still with Ian Gillan at this time.
yeah,
And Thin Lizzy weren't really anything yet. Eric Bell was still in Thin Lizzy.
yeah.
So
They
this
were
is-
like on their first three albums. They hadn't broken.
And that's not Funky Junction on the cover. That's some other band. You can look it up. You can Google who that really is on the cover. But this is just something that was assembled in the studio to cover some Deep Purple songs with a handful of originals. Dan. There's
So
a song
weird.
called Dan. I reviewed it. Take a look at. Oh, and also Funky Junction, the sound of today.
That's so weird. You know, the people that put this together, this is always organized by someone. Were they thinking they would do a series of these, like on different bands? Like there could have been a Black Sabbath one or an Alice Cooper one.
Right. Funky
Weird.
Junction plays the tunes of whatever. And,
there
and you know,
there are certain things that, you know, in rock history, and I'll pick on Deep Purple for a second, that I look back and go, did that really happen? And they're like, yes, that really happened. Such as
the false Deep Purple.
the false Deep Purple in 1980 that Rod Evans put together.
Yeah, with guys from Iron Butterfly and Randos.
So weird. And there's so few clips
Yeah.
of it. It's like this weird, anyway, yeah.
They played Montreal though, as if I recall. That's one of the reviews that's available. Here's a compilation that, to my knowledge, is either not on CD, has never been on CD, or
yes, Donington.
right. And there's some exclusive stuff on here. So we got Rainbow doing Stargazer, Scorpions doing Loving You Sunday Morning and Another Piece of Meat, Saxon Backs to the Wall, All Night Long by Rainbow, which I think is on that track may have been put out on various reissues by now. There's a Tim Derling band. I Like to Rock, April Wine.
That version's never been released on any April Wine compilation.
So there you go.
Yeah.
A band I don't know, Touch. Don't You Know What Love
Don't
Is?
you know what love is? Not a bad song, actually.
Produced and engineered by Roger
Martin Birch.
Glover.
Oh, okay. I was going to guess
And-
Martin Birch. but-
No, good guess though. Dieter Dirks did all the Scorpion stuff. Roger Glover did the Rainbow stuff, and Riot, Road Racing.
Yeah. That Touch song isn't bad, but they did not fit. They're very commercial sounding, like early, I don't know, Night Ranger, Aldo Nova. Like they didn't really fit. I don't know how they ended up on that bill, but they had a couple albums on Atlantic Records, and that song actually hit the top 100. But I remember listening to it and thinking, wow, I can't imagine this going over at Donington. But they loved that stuff over there, as they would call it, Wimphem.
Right. Oh, and by the way, I did have this out.
Oh, there you go.
There's
Yeah.
that Brighton Rock EP.
The late Jerry McGee. It's and that
Loss.
back cover. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's just because it's in black and white. Isn't that what Warner used for the Essentials?
Oh, I don't know. I don't recall what the Essentials look like. I said Johnny Victor. His name is Martin Victor.
Okay.
And last one that I'll show on this round before we go into the closing round. A recent release that was a vinyl exclusive. I've kind of stopped following Stryper. This is sort of the tail end of my collecting Stryper, but this is the Rocks Regime demos on vinyl and no CD release. There's also some bonus tracks and other sort of things on here. Limited edition for the 20th anniversary of Stryper.com. So the anniversary of a website is celebrated with the Rocks Regime demos being issued on vinyl. I don't know if I see the connection or not, but I mean,
And
it's,
those would go back to what, 1980? Like,
I would 83 it says, recorded
83,
at Casbah Studios in Fullerton, California, 1983.
so they
And,
literally rocked the Casbah.
They literally rocked the Casbah. Yeah, so I think that's it, and then we'll save the last few for
Yeah.
for the final round.
So Matt, whatever you got left, let's have it.
Okay, I'll go quickly through these. So I've got another collection of EPs and then a couple of albums that I really wish would get reissued. So the first set I want to talk about, so Noel Gallagher. I talk about Noel Gallagher a lot. I know Reed Little, who's been on Rock Daydream Nation quite often. I love hearing Reed Little talk about Noel Gallagher. We're two big fans of this artist. But so 2017 experimental album, Who Built the Moon? And then instead of releasing another album, we had to wait another like 6 or 7 years for the next album, but he put out these EPs, 12-inch EPs that have never been released digitally or CD. So you've got Wait in Return, we've got Black Star Dancing. So they all feature the actual titles, remixes. This is the Place and Blue Moon Rising. So this is all kind of, you know, when back in the 90s, Noel actually used to joke around with, I'm gonna be when I start writing space jazz and that sort of thing. And this is kind of where some of this music is leaning into. He's not bound by the definitely maybes and the what's the story morning glories kind of format of writing. He's not going into a studio with songs already written. It's just let's go in the studio. Hey, we really like the sound of this synthesizer thing or whatever, and let's make a song. So that was I ended up paying a lot more for those than I would for an actual album, but I'd like to see all that stuff kind of collected, right? And you want me to do my last set of things as well?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So here's a few albums. I love these albums, but for whatever reason, they've never been a proper reissue. First one I'm going to talk about is Ozzy's Osmosis. I'd love to see this reissued on vinyl. And then now we did get this CD was reissued way back in 2002. Never really gotten the attention that the first couple of Ozzy albums and Bark at the Moon have received. So I really like this album. There's a few
Me
songs
too.
that I thought were a little bit questionable, but the more I listened to it compared to the music that was kind of coming out, I at the time I really dig this. This is what I would consider Ozzy's last great kind of
I
studio
would
album.
agree, 100%.
Yep. Onto the Ozzy again. So Ozzy is the Ultimate Sin. This is a pretty flimsy copy, but that's how they came out back in, was this, Mike, 1986?
86.
Yeah. I had the VHS of the live concert of this, which was essentially kind of, I think it was kind of like a lip sync along to the studio tracks, but maybe they added some live. I don't know. It wasn't fully live. Anyway, I really like the album, but it's also never gotten kind of the attention that it deserves. We got a CD reissue way back in 1995, and that's it.
That's one of the ones with the small cover,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also has a shortened version of Shot in the Dark.
Yeah.
You can get the full length version of Shot in the Dark on the Best of Oz compilation, which I think, Tim, I showed off on our Rare CDs show that one time.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if I had what would I like to see Ozzy doing? I think he should be done with touring. I think he's kind of that, but I'd love to see him get into a studio with Jakey Lee and do a proper, here's my guitarist for the whole album. Me and the guitarist, we're going to write an album together. Jakey Lee and Ozzy Osbourne together. That would be, right at the top of my wow list. So
I just read an interview with Jake where he said he was contacted in the 90s when Zakk Wylde left the band to replace Zakk Wylde, but he never got a follow-up phone call.
Oh, really? So right when Joe Hope kind of joined
around
the band?
around that time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. The final thing I want to talk about is, so quite often I've seen people reflecting on 90s music, and I heard people say, Def Leppard Slang is my favorite Def Leppard album. And I'm kind of like, what? I've heard stuff like that, but if someone was to tell me Poison's Native Tongue from three
I played it yesterday in the car.
Yeah.
is an album, I mean, I wouldn't shake my head. This is a fantastic record. I mean, it's not the original Poison. It's got Richie Kotzen, and he kind of changed their sound a bit, I think, for the better. But listen, this has never gotten an official release on vinyl. I think the CD was reissued in Japan back in 2018, but any good for me here in North America. And I'm
Exactly.
and put out on vinyl unofficially, but let's get an official kind of repackaging of this record. So I think the fences, for however much fences can be mended, I think the animosity is kind of gone between Poison and the Richie Kotzen camp. So
Confirmed.
You'd like to
Um,
think so. Yeah.
I know that for a fact. I know
Yeah.
somebody who knows Richie Kotzen.
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that
that
was
should
probably
be, I was going to say that should be reissued with the B-side Whip Comes Down and as
Exactly.
many of the Stand remixes that they can fit in there.
yeah.
Yeah. And like the original version of Stand with the different lyrics and the slightly different kind of yeah, right on.
Yeah.
No, I love that album too. I argued
Me
it is for my favorite on the Contrarians. I like when I love CC. I mean, CC's O'Brien. He's the Poison guitarist, but I like the two albums they did with the other guitar players. I like the fact that we have those. It made
Yeah.
such a difference, right? It made such a difference who was on the guitar.
It brought them to a different level. They were
I
able
think
to
so.
do more,
Yeah.
you know.
And yeah, Native Tongue probably came out in the UK or on vinyl or like South America, but yeah, those would be something readily available, like Friday Music or even I guess Universal. Like a lot of these labels think these bands won't, some of these lesser known albums won't sell. I think they will. I think they would.
There's a
That's
niche
right.
audience for them. There's a lot of
Yep.
Poison fans out there that are starved. You
Yeah.
know, that's a fact.
Yeah.
I once made a joke about how terrible it would sound if if CC DeVille ever attempted to play Stand with Poison. But then somebody sent me a video on YouTube of CC playing Stand with Poison, and it was slightly different arrangement. And it was really good. It was
I didn't
really
think
good.
they ever did any of those songs
They did
with
Stand.
CC, although it makes sense because Stand was on all the greatest hits, so people know it, and it was actually it was a top 20 single in Canada. So
There you go.
anyway, all right. So Mike, how many you got left? I literally have two, and you know what one of them is.
I have two, and you know what one of them is, so I'll do the other
All right.
one.
So do the other one. Yeah.
Right, and this is one that
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I don't understand why. This is Randy Rhoads. So why? And it has a song on it that's not available on Ozzy's albums.
Good call.
Why is this not available? Now, Tim and I were talking about this earlier, and neither of us buy Air off iTunes. You Said It All, I know was available on iTunes at one point because Deke, our friend Deke, sent me a copy of it. So I know for a fact You Said It All has been released in Air. But why is this not available in any way, shape, or form on CD? In no reissue. This is on no deluxe. This is on no anything. No box set. And, if it was released, again, I would love to have this in the corner and that in the other corner. New.
Yeah.
This is great. Recorded October 1980 during the first Blizzard of Oz UK tour. Produced by Blizzard of Oz when they were still calling themselves Blizzard of Oz, and engineered by Max Norman. And then it has 3 dates stamped on the back: 80, 81, and 82. And maybe Derling knows why, but and also available on cassette, which is what I originally had.
So here's the other thing about that, guys, and this is another reason that this falls into the category of that In Excess one or the originals or archives. I'm just looking this up on Discogs. It was issued in the US and Canada under the regular CBS numbering system. So it was issued like an album would be.
Yes.
What didn't have some funny little, code on it. Yeah, I'm really surprised. There must be a rights issue with the song.
Ozzy
and I think we know why The Ultimate Sin's never been reissued. It's because of Shot in the Dark, right?
Yeah. That's right. He doesn't. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Incidentally, our mutual friend Peter Kerr just interviewed Bob Daisley, and apparently Bob wouldn't go there when he was asked certain questions about certain people.
Maybe
but
he legally can.
There's that possibility. Yep. But anyway, yeah, like there's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes with the Ozzy camp. Matt brought up some great releases there, and I don't know why there's no care taken to the Ozzy back catalog like it should be. It's a catalog that deserves a proper servicing on CD with all of the associated B-sides, smattering of live tracks, liner notes, restored artwork. I'm getting mad here.
Well, you know, with an artist that big, it stands out, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because like I said, most things get reissued over time, you know. And
Yeah.
for the Maiden fans out there, I just thought of this too, because the live EP that Mike held up made me think I used to see that all the time, like Made in Japan. It would just be, you could just get it, right? So if anybody just bought cassettes, it'd be like, yeah, I got all the Ozzy, and that would be one of them.
Right. That's
That made me think
exactly
of Made in
right.
Japan, which made me think of, what was it called? The Soundhouse tapes.
Yes, the
Yeah.
first EP.
That's never been readily available on CD long term, has it? Wasn't that only released for a limited time?
It was released partially as part of the Best of the Beast. Oh man,
Mike,
I can't remember all the different tracks, but
Yeah.
sorry.
do you have a copy of Eddie's archive that really?
I do.
And I was gonna add that to my list as far as, you know, stuff that's really hard to come by. Was trying to remember if the Soundhouse tapes were on that as well.
No, it was Best of the Beast. And the thing about Soundhouse tapes, okay, I remember now. I believe there were 3 tracks on the original Soundhouse tapes, plus a 4th track that was issued on the Best of the Beast vinyl, which was like a 6 record set or something, 4 record set. Very expensive, out of my price range. But I do have a bootleg, some kind of Iron Maiden bootleg that has all 4 Soundhouse tapes tracks on it. So that's how I've satisfied my own need for that release, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, so I've just got, Mike and I have one thing to talk about that we both have the same. Kind of wanted to save for the end, but I have one other thing. This is kind of funny, and I just thought of this last minute. Would I listen to it? Maybe once,
Yeah.
but it does kind
Okay.
of have some nostalgia, because I remember seeing this movie. It originally came out in 1983. I saw it in 1986, and I can remember there was one scene in particular where I think it was the first time I ever laughed so hard at something that I couldn't breathe.
Okay.
And it is a scene where a character played by Rick Moranis was stuck in a beer vat. And they showed him a little tiny little head, great big round body. And I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Of course, I'm talking about, it started out as Hamlet. It ended up Strange Brew. Bob and Doug McKenzie, Strange Brew, the original soundtrack. It's only ever been issued on vinyl and cassette in 1983. So this is a Canadian version on Anthem Records, and it's never been issued on anything. They put out the Great White North on CD in the 90s, and I bought that because it had Takeoff on it in the 12 Days of Christmas. But this has never, ever been reissued. And it's like, that's kind of strange that, you know, there'd be enough niche fans out there that would get this, but maybe they figured that, you know, putting it out on CD, you'd get a lot of Rush fans buying it. But this doesn't really have that. But it does have the title song from the movie by Ian Thomas, which is a pretty rocking little song.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'm a little surprised this has never been reissued, especially by Universal Canada, because they're such Canadian icons, right? People, I'm sure to this day, people still think we all talk like that and dress like that. But
we do, eh? I was
yeah.
just putting
Oh,
on a
beauty.
voice earlier because I'm a professional, eh?
Yeah, $10 is $10. Okay, so the big one, the one that has been talked about, a lot of people have talked about, this should be reissued. There's a million reasons why it probably never will completely. But Mike, when we did both of our Rare CD episodes, did not show this. And it's one of the few CDs I don't have. Hearing Aid with stars.
Which
I got to tell you, I remember seeing the video to Stars on Much Music back in '86, and I wasn't even into heavy metal back then, but I always watched it because I always loved when they would play the extended version
the
with
solos.
all of those guitar solos. I just thought it was the coolest thing. And for those of you that don't know, I'm sure most of you watching this do, Hearing Aid was Ronnie James Dio's response to Band Aid, USA for Africa.
Yeah.
Northern Lights, like the idea of getting a bunch of musicians together to do a charity song for famine relief. I think it was mainly famine relief. It was delayed coming out, so they kind of lost the momentum. It was recorded in like May of '85. It didn't come out for another year. Never did all that well, never sold all that well. Came out on Mercury Records, and you had kind of a who's who. Mike pulled up the record, you can see it a lot better. Kind of a who's who of hard rock and heavy metal, basically anybody that wasn't on the road at the time. Because I mean, you know, if think of a metal or hard rock band that was big in '85, '86, or even slightly big, they were probably on Hearing Aid. I mean,
the ones that weren't, Ronnie James Dio had some words about that as well, but it's virtually everybody except for a few notable names like Van Halen are conspicuous.
Van Halen, obviously you're not going to have Ozzy on here.
Yeah.
You know, there's none of the nobody from Deep Purple, nobody from Def Leppard. Well, technically,
one guy from Def Leppard.
Def Leppard, but then again, they were busy at that time. But yeah, now, and also, so it came out. Stars was the song, but it came out as a 9-song album. So it's got other songs on it, some of which are versions that were hard to find for very many years. Now, I can't speak to all the bands on here, but I know that it has Distant Early Warning by Rush, which was from the Grace Under Pressure live home video, which at that time had never been released in, audio, just strictly audio form. It's got Heaven's on Fire, which I'm pretty sure is from the Animalized Live Uncensored concert, because it's got, I know you know it. Here it comes, goes like this, So that's, I mean, I know Paul's stage dress are probably unchanged night by night, but, and for me, so I first found this for $1 at Zeller's in Fredericton in 1993. I'm pretty sure Matt was with me. He didn't know what it was. I'm freaking out because I couldn't believe how rare it was. But of course, I have to say it. It's got Dave Meniketti on Stars singing, not playing guitar, but singing. And it also has the studio version of a song called Go for the Throat, which had only appeared on Y&T's Open Fire Live album in a live form. So I didn't have the studio version of it. So this is a pretty good find. But as far as CD goes, of course, it was issued in Japan when it first came out in 1996, and then one other time in 1994, and that is it.
Right.
And until recently, Mike's the only person I know personally that owns this.
And I had completely, when we did those shows,
we did folks. We did not one, but 2 rare CD episodes.
I'd completely forgotten about this.
Mike didn't bring it out. I'm like,
and I was like, I thought, Tim, I'd showed you way more rare stuff than this, but this is the one that you were like really focused on. And then I posted it on Facebook, and Reed Little jumped on that, and Reed was like, oh my God, I've been looking for this, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then last week I posted a picture of me holding it, and I said, some people say, I didn't say I claimed it. I said, some people say this is the rarest CD that I own. And I ended up getting like over 600 likes on that. Wow. And one guy who said, it's not that rare. There's one on Discogs right now for $50.
First of all, no, there isn't.
There might have been on that day. But it wasn't a very good condition copy.
I bet it was more than $50 for the shipping. It wouldn't have cost it. Nobody could pay $50 and get that CD just like that.
The shipping was like another $25 or something.
It needs a proper reissue. And yesterday, ever since Dio died in 2010, Wendy Dio has been saying it's going to get reissued.
Yes.
There's too many different artists from too many different labels.
Yeah.
Even though most of the labels are swallowed up now, but you got a Hendrix song on here. The Hendrix estate is messed up. I don't know how they ended up on there in the first place, but the fact that you've got a Mercury pressing of that's amazing, Mike. And you definitely do have a rare CD. And yes, whoever that was, it is that rare, because I've been looking for this thing for over 30 years now and have never, and I don't even have it on vinyl. I've never even come across it on vinyl. So yeah.
Now I reposted the picture yesterday on a different Facebook group and got a lot more reactions. And then there were 2 kind of negative Nancy's that raining on my parade. One of them says, well, without the Obi strip, it's really worth a lot less. And I'm like, I'm not paying extra money for a piece of paper, dude. I'm not.
I
It's
mean,
great.
they're right. I mean, they're right, but
Yeah, but I don't
it's
care that
still
much.
rare.
I
It's
don't care
still
that
rare.
much. I
My
have, you've seen my collection, Tim. I keep the Obi strips, okay? But if I find a copy in the wild without an Obi strip, I'm not gonna keep hunting for a piece of paper, dude. I'm not.
If it was missing the booklet and you had the
Right.
disc in the back
That's
cover
a
tray,
deal
it would
breaker.
still be rare.
But that's a deal breaker for me. I want
Yeah.
I want the
I'm
complete
just
CD,
saying,
okay?
like in any
Yeah.
form, if you
Right,
had
it's digital.
if you had the booklet, if you had the case and this disc was missing, it's still rare. You could still burn a copy and at least look
You
like
could
you had it.
possibly piece together a complete copy.
You could, yes, yes.
Now, the other guy who rained on my parade said, well, this has an extremely high level of hum on the CD. And I just responded, I've never noticed, I've never had that problem. And then he sent me like an Audacity graph, and he's like, if you listen at 0.25 seconds, right when Ronnie says, we do, you can hear the hum. And I'm like, who gives a rat's ass, man? Like, I
You
have
know,
never in my life listened to this CD and said, man, this is a problem. I'm not enjoying this. There's too much back. I've never had that experience. And even if I had, it sounds better than the vinyl on my equipment.
my cassette, I remember listening to it, has a little bit of, there's one part where it's like in one part, and that would drive me nuts every time. I don't think
Right,
it's
but
recorded.
that's probably a physical issue with the
I
actual
think
physical
yes, yeah,
ribbon.
that's right, that's right. So yeah, I mean, it's rare. It's rare, and it would be nice to see it properly reissued. You know,
Matt's raising his
I'm not even
hand.
talking about the quality of the song itself. I happen to like it. It is cheesy,
Oh, it's
but I
awesome
like it.
cheesy. It's
I
awesome
like it.
cheesy.
I love the guitars, all those guitar solos. Lynch and Malmsteen and Neil Sean and Brad Gillis and the Blues to Cult guys. And
Yeah.
go ahead, Matt.
No, sorry, right when you're talking about the guitarist, I don't have a long history with this album, but I just wanted to throw in one personal anecdote and get your guys' opinion on this. And I'm sorry I had to butt in on you when you're talking about
No, no, that's
on the guitar solos and stuff. But so I've only actually gotten into this particular collection in the last 7 or 10 years. To be honest, a lot of the bands that are on Hearing Aid weren't really my favorites. I mean, I like Queensryche now and Jeff Tate, but like I wasn't like a Journey fan or Y&T fan. But something that I found really interesting, I watched the documentary, the making of this, and there's so that one section where it shows all the different guitarists doing all their individual solos. Now I was like, okay, now this is where it's going to get really interesting. And you know what I found? Tell me what you guys think about this. So you had a lot of the kind of hot 80s players at the time, like your George Lynch's and was Michael Wilton on there too from Queensryche? I can't. Anyway,
No.
so
no.
but I know there was a lot of kind of hot 80s players, but then Neil Sean from Journey's on
Yeah.
came on. I'm not a fan of Journey at all, but in my opinion, he is the freaking star of whatever was going on with all those solos. Like everybody else was doing their kind of noodling thing and but when Neil Sean came on, I'm like, now that's a guitar solo. So I don't know what you guys kind of
I mean, that's like I love the fact that he was on there, because I'm sure a lot of people were probably thinking, the open arms dude is on here. Wait, this guy can shred with the best of them and shred melodically, and by the way, make it look effortless.
Right. So when I was a kid, and you can find this on my channel, I had the Ronnie James Dio interview from Much Music, which had some of that documentary that Matt's referring to, not the whole thing. But one thing that stuck out to me, even as a kid, and I didn't know who Neil Sean was, but you said effortless. He's playing this solo, and he's making these faces as he's playing it, just like, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is a guy who's just 100% at ease with his instrument, and he's making these facial expressions, like, looking for feedback from the people in the control room, and it just struck me as that's a guitar player. It's second nature to him,
And I do have to say, I love Brad Gillis's part. Just the whammy.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of
whammy bar.
whammy.
Yeah.
Another thing that speaking of the guitar, that Ronnie Dio said in the Much Music interview, he was asked about Yngwie J. Malmsteen, and he said, you know, Yngwie had this reputation, and he said Yngwie was just perfect. He was beautiful with Ronnie. You know, the utmost respect. And if Ronnie said, Yngwie, I think you can do better, Yngwie would say, if you think so, and he would do it better. You know.
What that makes me think of is I know we're running long here, but this is a great discussion.
Yeah.
I remember like in 89, 90, I was all about the rock magazines. And I remember my mother had come home from visiting some relatives, and there must have been a flea market. And she found some old issues of Circus, about 5 or 6 issues of Circus from 86. So I thought, this is great. And one of them had a little piece about hearing aid, which honestly in 1990, I'd kind of forgotten about hearing aid. And so, but I remember reading one of the Spinal Tap guys, because the Spinal Tap guys are on this, right? One of them said, I'm so glad that Yngwie put the J in his name so we don't confuse him with all the other Yngwie Malmsteens.
And at the time, I didn't know that Spinal Tap were a fake band, and I was like, really? There's other
Much Music
I
would
thought
play
it was
their
real.
videos. Yeah, Much Music would play their videos like Hellhole, and they'd never say anything. I just thought they were an old band. And you know what? I've watched like the Contrary stuff. A lot of people thought that.
And Ronnie Dio in that interview,
I didn't know it was a movie.
Ronnie Dio never like broke the illusion in that interview that I'm talking about. He said that David St. Hubbins and Derek Smalls were two of the most professional people he ever met, which I'm sure is true in real life. But then he said something that was a little out there when he said, they're both the greatest guitar players and greatest singers I've ever heard in my life. And he smiled. And that was the only hint that there was any fiction.
I love it. I read there was a Guitar World thing, the best guitarists of all time. And there was a quote from Nigel Tufnell. And most people thought, well, I'm inspired by blah, 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 and this and that. Nigel Tufnell's quote was, and I have committed it to memory, if you put a live ferret in your trousers, he'll run around. You'd be surprised at the energy. And then when asked to quote about him, David St. Hubbins, that's the singer, right? That's Michael McKee and David St. Hubbins. He said, no one sounds like him. No one even tries. And the other thing Nigel said was, let those blokes like Beck and Clapton duke it out. Let me watch and laugh.
You know, one other thing about this project that I want to mention before we close, and again, the Much Music interview with Dio is incredible. There was an issue with the Spinal Tap guys. According to Dio, some people that he asked to participate in this project outright refused because of the involvement of Spinal Tap, because those individuals felt that the involvement of Spinal Tap turned this project into a joke, and they refused to participate. And so Ronnie Dio didn't name and shame, but he did say it's too bad that these people couldn't find the generosity in their hearts that Spinal Tap did.
Yeah. And one other thing, and before we wrap this up, Matt raised a good point. If they do reissue it, it needs to be a CD, Blu-ray, DVD set with the documentary.
With the documentary, and in my opinion, bonus tracks, the edit version of the single.
Yeah, that should come out. Yeah, people would buy it. I think more, I honestly think that there's more people like us that would buy it now than bought it in 1986, because in 1986, heavy metal wasn't as popular as it wasn't as commercial.
No.
And a lot of the guys that are on this are still popular now. I mean, you're going to get, it's got Motley Crue guys on it. It's got Jeff Tate's on here. It's got Tommy Aldridge. It's got the Appice brothers. I mean,
arguably a guy like Dio is bigger today posthumously than he was in 1986.
Right. And it's basically a Dio song, right? Can we agree? I mean, Jimmy Bain and Viv Campbell wrote it.
Yeah,
and Ronnie. I mean, it could very well have been on one of his albums. And you've got all kinds of connect. You've got Craig Goldie on there, and you've got, like I said, Vinny, and but yeah, I've always really enjoyed it. It's got Claude Chanel on here too.
Yeah.
It's got Adrian Smith and Dave Murray, which is surprising because I've seen their twin lead bit. It got cut from the final version for some reason, but
yeah.
Anyway, it's should be on CD, and
absolutely
make it same thing. When you buy it, a portion of it goes to something. Make it
my thought exactly.
Goes to Ronnie's cancer you know,
Anything,
right?
really. It can be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go, folks. That is our list of things that we think should be either on CD, reissued on CD, readily available on CD. I'm sure we're missing a bunch, you know, bands that aren't on our radar. List the comments below. Thank you for watching. Be sure and follow Mike Ladano and Grab a Stack of Rock. You'll be seeing Matt again on this very channel. Don't forget to check out TeePublic for Tim's Vinyl Confessions and Grab a Stack of Rock merch, as well as some other great channels, Too Loud, Too Old, The Contrarians. It's good quality stuff, as you know. My books are available on Amazon. And also, I think that's it. Guys, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, hope this stuff gets put out on CD. We will see you next time on Tim's Vinyl Confessions.